You're listening to the Good Old Boys Fantasy Football Podcast. Now here's your hosts, Kevin, Derek, and Alex.
All right, and welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of the Good Old Boys Fantasy Football Podcast. I am Derek, and joined, as always, by your co-hosts, Kevin and Alex. I'm not going to lie, I sat there and I was getting ready to launch into it, and I'm like Kevin was just there. Kevin was literally just there, and now he's gone.
He was right there.
He like David Copperfield himself. Like, what's going on here? And now he's back. Gentlemen, how are we doing tonight?
Good, man. You know, the lovely thing about doing this show remotely is what you're used to having around you is not there, right? And so normally I have a soda or a Gatorade and my big water bottle that I'm sure everybody's seen as I tip it up right in the middle of my camera. I have none of that because I'm in Texas this week. I'm not back home. So I realized that as the intro was playing, I went, oh crap, I need some water. Like I need something. So I'm running over looking for a cup and found the plastic or the coffee cup, but it's wrapped in plastic. So I'm trying to unwrap that real quick. And then I'm trying to fill it up. And you're doing the intro. So I just slide back in right here. So a little out of sorts, but nonetheless, man, I'm doing good. I'm ready to go. We are Super Bowl bound here. So let's get after it. Let's do it. The season is about to close on us, but we have a ton of news this week.
There is a ton of news, and we'll get to that ton of news. We got to talk about Conference Championship weekend. Good sip. Because I picked two teams of the four to make it to the Super Bowl, and I was wrong on both of them. And I feel like I got robbed because, I think that Philly, as they demonstrated, Philly was the best team in the NFC pretty much from the word jump, right? Like they demonstrated that they were the class of the NFC. And San Francisco was kind of for everything that went wrong for them to even be in the conference championship game is remarkable. They lost their, the quarterback that they staked their future on. And they lost him early in the season. 2. Yeah. And then the quarterback that was replaced that got them to the conference championship last year just happened to be hanging around still because, as luck would have it, right? And so he carries them through and then he goes down. And so then it's Mr. Irrelevant. It's a guy that nobody expected would take a meaningful snap at any point during the season. Hell, I think when we started the season, nobody thought he would take any snaps, right? Like that was just one of those things. And then especially as we got, further into the season and it seemed like, okay, Jimmy Garoppolo's kind of got this thing going here. We never thought that Brock Purdy would take a meaningful snap. And then it was like, oh, okay, they are down to legitimately their fourth quarterback this year. And so it was a miracle. And I think it was a long shot anyways. I just felt the story was too good. If there's nothing that I love more about, a football team, it's a good story. So I thought the story was too good. And I was blinded by the fact that there was a pretty good story going on the other side too with Jalen Hurts and the Eagles and that defense. Yeah, I think that Philly, rightfully won that game. I cannot say the same about the AFC. I cannot say that the rightful team won that game. There's too much.
Before you get cooking on the AFC side of things, because there's lots of things to say on that one. Would you have, like, honestly, if somebody had told me, right, I watched the whole game, but if I hadn't watched it and somebody told me, yeah, Brock Purdy started the game, finished the game, and was 100% completion rating on that, I would have thought that was a game that went down to the wire, like competitive the whole way through. You leave the detail out that that he had an elbow injury and left the game for a good chunk in the middle, and Josh Johnson had to come in and play quarterback there. And then Josh Johnson gets knocked out with a concussion, and Brock Purdy is the only quarterback left that they can, bring back there. And it's, do we put him back there? Do we just run the Wildcat the rest of the time?
Fullback was the, right. The emergency. It was almost like we had in hockey, they have the emergency backup goalie, the guy who just is in the arena as on the off chance that, both goalies get hurt, that they can still put a goalie in there and finish the game off. Juszczyk was like the e-bug, the emergency backup. EBUQ. And so we almost had that situation. I think it's I think that it didn't matter who San Francisco was going to have at quarterback. I think that Philly defense is real. And look, it's a cliche, but it's true. Defense is going to win you championships, and their defense, that Philly defense, is just something else right now.
Well, it was interesting too, the way that they attacked that San Francisco line, right? Like, and this was one of the things that, they kind of neutralized San Francisco on, one, the pass rush, but two, the run defense that had been so effective. And it turns out that the way to neutralize that is just run the ball at Nick Bosa, who actually, as it turns out, has a horrendous player efficiency rating on running plays. Even though, it's 18 sacks, all of that leads the leagues in sack totals. Who knew that how many offensive minds and coaches have we seen, miss that one, that the secret to unlocking this was just to run the ball dead at Nick Bosa and let my wide receivers fight on the outside for it. Like,
yeah, he had a bad game. I mean, in the run, he had a bad running game, right? It was crazy, and they just pounded that on the telecast. I mean, every single time they went read option, Nick Bosa crashed. And so either A, he's taking the heat for the linebacker not following the rules that the defense set forth and doing his job, or Nick Bosa had a bad game. I guess not being in the locker room, we can leave that up for speculation, because Nick Bosa crashed hard every single time they went read option. And Jalen Hurts was more than content. Here, all right,
yeah.
Gainwell, Miles Sanders, Boston Scott, here you go. Like, I don't need to run the ball. And Jalen Hurts really didn't. I mean, he was pedestrian. Right? Mm-hmm. The defense made Jalen Hurts look pedestrian, but the run game was so good that it didn't matter. And by the time you're on your fourth quarterback and he gets knocked out with a concussion, and once you realize that Brock Purdy can't throw, lights out, man. It didn't matter. I mean, bring the safeties down. We're going to spread them out. Keep one high, just in case he breaks a tackle on the linebackers. And other than that, you're bringing the other one down in, and we're going to put 9 in the box, and we're just going to force the issue.
Right.
It was unfortunate that it happened that way for the Niners, right? It was unfortunate that that's how the NFC Championship game had to go down. The injuries are a part of the game, and kudos to the Eagles, because they were playing well enough that I don't know that it mattered. I think that San Francisco would have kept it closer, right? We wouldn't have had a score that, if you look at it on the surface level, you go, wow, Philadelphia just kicked their butts. Like, well, yeah, they beat them really well. But when half of your playbook literally goes out the window, you are fighting with one hand tied behind your back, and you will – I don't know that you can win a conference championship game in any format doing that. Like, even, the Broncos led by Tim Tebow, right? Like, they showed you can win a wild card round game that way. Yeah, but as soon as you got into the divisional round against the Patriots, okay, lights out. We ain't messing around with this. So, congratulations to San Francisco. Good season. Definitely overachieved what I think a lot of people thought possible when Trey Lance went down, and then again when Jimmy G went down. Brock Purdy, I wish you the fastest of recoveries and good luck with your surgery, because it was UCL, right? Is what he tore. So,
he's trying to avoid Tommy John.
Yeah, they're saying it's about a 6-month recovery on that one. So it'll be very interesting to see what the Niners do this offseason, right? Trey Lance has had two surgeries already on his ankle. Jimmy G is
the second one was just to remove pins
correct.
From the foot. It wasn't because they botched the first surgery. It was known that he was going to go back under because of that. And there's still a long road to recovery, right? Mm-hmm. But just so that way everyone who's watching is clear about that. It's not It's not that the first surgery got botched. They knew that they were going to have to go back in and remove some of the metal that they put in Trey Lance to make him heal properly.
So he can get through airport security again.
Yes.
Yeah, those things don't set him off. Trust me, I know. Anyway, Jimmy G also not under contract anymore. They can't use the franchise tag on him. So if he's coming back to settle the waters down, they're going to have to sign him to it. Same
and with
thing.
as many teams that need quarterbacks, like that asking price is astronomical, especially a guy like Jimmy Garoppolo. I don't think he is either.
I don't think he's coming back.
But I think he will get a bag from a team that wants some consistency out of the quarterback play. And again, here's the thing about Jimmy Garoppolo. We all know this. He's not going to wow you with what he does. He is not going to, take a game over like a Jalen Hurts could, or like a Lamar Jackson could, or, any of those really dynamic playmaking, Mahomes, a playmaking quarterback. But Jimmy Garoppolo is going to give you stability, and he's going to give you a chance to win because of his decision-making. And I think that's really appealing especially for teams that haven't had stability, or, somebody who is just a calm, quiet presence that can give your team a chance. So there are teams out there right now that are probably, lining up, waiting for free agency period to talk. I'm sure there's actually teams probably already talking to his agent about
exactly, right? Like the one that no one's really been talking about that I think would actually be a pretty good fit is if the Seahawks choose not to bring Geno Smith back, or if they're unable to get a deal done. Jimmy Garoppolo does fit a lot of what the Seahawks want to run. You manage the game. You're able to hand it off. He's pretty turnover adverse, right? So he's not putting the ball in a lot of bad situations. He seems like a guy that Pete Carroll could, work with really well, because it doesn't seem like Jimmy, he's not a me guy, right? Like he doesn't have his type of offense and has to have his guys in there and everything else, on top of the fact that he can provide a lot of insight to the San Francisco 49ers offensive philosophy with Kyle Shanahan. Like that is I think it's a really strong possibility when you start thinking about it. Right now, Robert Saleh is in New York with the Jets. I think that's a possible option. I think New Orleans is a possible option, knowing what they didn't get out of Andy Dalton and famous Jameis here this past season. So the Houston Texans with, again, the Niners defensive coordinator, Demeco Ryans, just signing today. Like, I think that's a possibility that he goes in to there. So you're absolutely right. Like, there are the Carolina Panthers possibly, right?
There are a number of suitors willing to take on the services of Jimmy Garoppolo.
Yeah.
I like the New Orleans fit. The Seattle fit makes a ton of sense. And I don't see any way where San Francisco can bring him back. And so that leaves the Niners with, two recently repaired quarterbacks that they have to deal with. So
you draft another in the 5th round, and you just
you hope for the best, right?
Give him reps, right? You're going to bring in a camp body anyway, right? Like, so you're going to have a camp body. You might as well draft another one.
And they've proven that you can take a dude in the 7th round and maybe he can win you a few games.
Yeah, they bring a guy in that was drafted at 199. Yeah, bring him in for 2 years, whatever he's got left in the tank there, where now, again, he doesn't have to go out.
With ties to the area, to the Northern California area.
Of course, talking about Tom Brady there, who's an unrestricted free agent there. So that's one of those things I kept hearing that pop up on the news cycle constantly. But Alex, kind of back to something you said where, he's not going to take Jimmy G's not going to take a game over and all of that. But Jimmy G won't go out there. While he won't necessarily take a game over, he's not going to lose you the game unless he goes full Orlovsky. If he can stay away from going full Orlovsky on a play, he'll win you games. He won't necessarily lose you games. So
step out of the back of the end zone one time and it haunts you for a while.
You never go full Orlovsky. Never.
Again, that play was a pick 6 if he doesn't step out of the back of the end zone. What no one finishes is that play against the Broncos. the come on, man. Like, come on, man, what? You gave up 2 points instead of 7 because when he threw that ball, Denver picked it off and ran it back. That was a defensive touchdown for the Broncos that, they would have had he
nullified by boneheadedness.
Yeah, I mean, boneheadedness, but he put his team 5 points ahead basically by doing it.
It worked. If you're going to give up points, rather give up 2 than 6.
Right.
So
exactly. So, kind of shifting gears here a little bit and kind of heading over towards the AFC. I know that was one that, that left a bitter taste in a lot of folks' mouth. I know how that one kind of, as far as how that ended, things like that. What were you guys' thoughts on that one?
I
hate
things happen, right? Patrick Mahomes played far better than I anticipated him to play, and really in the midst of the play, you never knew that he had a high ankle sprain last week. In between snaps, you could tell, right? Like he was hobbling and it bothered him a little bit, but during the play, kudos to him, man. Like, good Lord, I would love to have whatever they're feeding him, because for him to even get out there and put forth a performance of solid stature is crazy. But for him to have over 300 yards, another game-winning drive, right? Like the go-ahead touchdown with 2 minutes and 10 seconds left or whatever the heck it was to MVS. It was just absolutely crazy. So, yeah, I don't know, man. It was back and forth. Cincinnati dug their hole in the first quarter, though, right? Like, what was it, 17 total yards in the first quarter? You're kicking field goals instead of touchdowns. You have 2 – they weren't terrible, but 2 turnovers, right, that kind of screwed some things up and got them out of rhythm. You didn't use your run game the way that you should have, which was Cincinnati's problem every game they lost this year. Was they forgot that they had Joe Mixon and just didn't stay true to the run game. And if Jamar Chase is getting doubled, you got to find a way around it, right? Use Hayden Hurst, use Tyler Irwin. Like, I get it, Boyd went out, but Chase and Higgins are getting doubled. Like, it was,
and Higgins still had a good game.
Yeah, Higgins had a good game, but you just quit forcing it, man. This is now elite. Like, and this is the difference between Patrick Mahomes and everybody else in the NFL right now is they trade away Tyreek Hill, and Patrick Mahomes is actually better. You get rid of anybody else's number one in the league, and they are worse. Like, that is a differentiating factor between how the Chiefs run their offense and everybody else in the NFL does it, because Josh Allen couldn't do that if you took away Stephon Diggs, right?
Oh, yeah, he couldn't do it before Diggs.
Right. Joe Burrow wasn't able to do it when he took away Jamar Chase. I don't think, Tua couldn't do it if you took away Tyreek. Dak couldn't do it if you took away CeeDee Lamb. We saw Aaron Rodgers couldn't do it when you take away Devontae Adams.
Right.
Right? I mean, so the list goes on. Stafford couldn't do it without Cooper Kupp. I mean, the list
goes on. He also couldn't do it without Megatron.
Right. I mean, so there's tons and tons and tons of data showing that Mahomes should have had a worse season, and he didn't. It opened up the Chiefs' offense because they didn't feel like they had to feed anybody the ball specifically, maybe besides Travis Kelce. But that dude is an alien in himself, because how is he always open? He is the best player on the field most games, like just flat out. And he is wide open all the freaking time. Every time you go zone against the Chiefs, he goes to Travis Kelce, because he just sits in the hole, takes his 8 to 12 yards, points for the first down, and then they start over again. Like, it is stupid how easy it is for them.
Mm-hmm.
It's gonna be a challenge for the Eagles to try and figure out how to minimize the damage that Travis Kelce can do, and really it is just minimizing the damage, right? Because they're gonna find ways to get him the football, but you just have to minimize what he does. It does set up an interesting. I don't want to talk about that game anymore, so I'll move on. But I'm just so upset about that.
What are you frustrated about?
I really wanted
3 missed calls is what I'm frustrated about.
Yeah, it's the missed calls, and I get that. Look, I don't want to bag on the refs.
To the Cowboys, and they missed tons of calls against the Niners.
No, I understand that.
Right. And we didn't have a bleeding heart for the Cowboys. We told Cowboys Nation to suck it up and quit making excuses. So why is this different?
It's just hard for me because it's the Chiefs and it's not.
I'm sure you guys have seen the play, right? The Kittle catch, right, where he tipped it to himself 3 different times.
Yeah.
He was covered up. He was ineligibly downfield. It was the biggest play of the game, arguably. It completely changed the momentum for San Francisco. And it was a missed call. He was covered up. He was an ineligible receiver. He should not have been able to go out into a route because he was covered up. And instead, he goes and blocks for – sorry, as I stick my hand in the face. He goes and blocks for half a second across the line over towards the right tackle and then zigs back and up the seam. It's a great play by, George Kittle. And, oh, what a great pass by Brock Purdy. That was the game. For all intents and purposes, and we didn't give a shit.
And realistically, I don't want to bag on the refs. They have a tough enough job. We have a problem in this country of people bagging on officials. It goes down to even at the youth sports level. Like, I get it, and the refs are human and they make mistakes. You just hope that they don't get made in the biggest stages of a game. It's going to happen. It's the Chiefs. I just don't.
It was
okay. Do you care? And again, we're switching sports. The Lakers-Celtics game that was on a couple nights ago. LeBron James with 1 second
when he got fouled,
the game-winning layup, and Jason Tatum absolutely rips his left hand down, and they just let the play go, and the Lakers lost in overtime. Again, no one cared.
Oh, plenty of people cared.
Yeah.
And here's the thing. Plenty of people cared, but it was a regular season game. It was not a winner go home game. And I understand that, in the grand scheme of things, one game can make a lot of difference when you get down to it, right? When you get down to the end, it's like, dang, I wish we would have had that game. But, or if you miss the playoffs by one game, right? Like you can look back and point at those, but you can look back at a number of different things over the course of a season and say, well, we could have done that better. We could have done this better. We shouldn't have given up a 20-point lead or whatever it is.
Right.
You hate that it happens in a winner go home, the largest stage on the most expensive sport, in the most watched, most bet on sport, that it is unfortunate. And you would hope that there would be a way to rectify those wrongs. The whole extra down thing, like that, it's just, those are simple mistakes that shouldn't get made. And right. So I harp on it because it's the Chiefs. And I don't want to see the Chiefs in the Super Bowl. I picked against them the whole way, right? And part of me just wanted to be right, on one of them. Just wanted to be right on one of them. And look, I understand we are witnessing greatness with what Patrick Mahomes is. Right. And the conversation that we had last week about, does Mahomes get a pass? Oh, he's gotten him to another Super Bowl. Now, whether or not he can win it, it does set up a fantastic storyline. Derek, I know we'll get back to this game, but it does set up a fantastic storyline of Andy Reid trying to win a Super Bowl against the Eagles,
right?
A team that he could never win the Super Bowl with in the first place.
Right. Got him to 1, 15 years. 4 conference championships. And got fired ultimately from Philadelphia because he couldn't get him to the, get him over that hump type of thing. So one of the things that kind of stuck out in my mind, right? Like everybody's talking about the holding on 3rd and 4, right? Where Patrick Mahomes zips out of the pocket, gets downfield, gets shoved out of bounds. And I do agree. I think there was 2 missed hold calls, one on Orlando Brown, one on the left guard as well, back in the backfield. Actually, they missed the call twice on Orlando Brown and one on the left guard there as well. But in which case, if it's called, it's offsetting penalties, you replay the down, which at that point, it's sending the game to overtime because 8 seconds left. Yeah, they got to basically get to the end zone or bust with 8 seconds left and no timeouts, right? They're not going to be able to get the ball down the field enough to set up a field goal and try and get that done, right? But the one that really stuck out of my mind on that one was the play right before that, 2nd and 4, where Mahomes drops back, pressure there, dirts the ball before it gets back to the line of scrimmage, and there's a receiver on the line to it. But like that was the thing that really stuck out to me, was what was really the difference between that one and the one that Joe Burrow got called for intentional grounding on, where Samaje Perine was on a direct line of where he threw that. Both of those receivers, well, past the line of scrimmage, both receivers seemingly in the area, but one's intentional grounding, one's not. Like, that was one of the ones that I was like, what in the world's going on with that?
Yeah, and I'd have to go back and really look at that play. I think part of it is the depth that Perine was at, considered or in comparison to the depth where
I think it was Noah Gray. Maybe it might have been like,
yeah. And I don't know. Right. And yeah, they're judgment calls, but I can understand that. You want them to swallow their whistle. If you're going to swallow it on one thing, you have to swallow it on the other. Or if you're going to call it gray area on one, then you need some consistency, and a similar situation should be called the same way. Like, I get that argument. Listen, I wanted the Bengals to win. I picked the Bengals to win.
Right.
I'm not going to sit here and make excuses like that, because the Bengals did plenty to shoot themselves in the foot before 5 minutes left in the fourth quarter. That, I'm just not going to go on that. And ultimately, right, wrong, or indifferent, if you don't shove Mahomes out of bounds and take those 15 yards at the end of the game, none of those penalties make a dang bit of difference, because it's going to overtime again. Right?
You got to be smart. Situational football,
error, right? And the referees had to call that. And unfortunately, the guy got hurt. Was it Jermaine Pratt?
I think it was Osai. It was Osai.
I mean, that poor dude, he blew out his knee that last step before he got to the bench. If you go back and look at that replay, like, I feel bad for him. Like, he committed the penalty that lost them the game, and he's going to have surgery on his knee now, and a short off season after being in the conference championship game. So I feel bad for the guy, but why he gets a pass from the national media? Dude, you caused the 15-yard penalty. It wasn't the missed holding call. It wasn't, the not called intentional grounding that made up those 15 yards. It was the fact that you took a shot at Mahomes with 8 seconds left in the game, and it created a 15-yard penalty that allowed for a 44-yard field goal, and they would not have attempted that at 59 yards. Would not. They would have had Mahomes huck it into the end zone and just hope that you can have Travis Kelce come down with it. Like, that would have been the game plan. Backyard football, give him as much time as possible, and we hope Kelce can get down there because he's taller and bigger than everybody. Box him out and come down with it. But that's not what happened. It was a mental mistake that caused the penalty that put them in field goal position. Like, that it is what it is.
Right. Well, any other thoughts on these games, or should we move on to some carousel?
Should be a fun Super Bowl.
I think so,
it's just a battle of attrition, right? Like, everybody's beat up, banged up. We're going to find out. I know we'll find out after Super Bowl Sunday that either that night or the next day, dudes are playing through whatever it was that dudes should probably not be playing through because they get a chance to hoist the Lombardi Trophy. So it should be a fantastic game. And realistically, it's going to be good on good, right? We're going to see a Chiefs offense that's clicking along, going up against that Eagles defense that is clicking along. And then we get to see how Jalen Hurts handles, that big stage. He's been on that big stage before, right? Like, I
think Hurts will have an easier time against Kansas City than he had against San Francisco. Like,
I would agree with that too.
I think San Francisco realized it was on their defense, and they really did everything to stop Jalen Hurts possible. And while Kansas City's defense steps up in the playoffs, they're not at the caliber of the 49ers. And I think at least allows Hurts to look more like himself than 150 yards passing, no touchdowns, just kind of a pedestrian passing performance, even though, as a team, they had 4 rushing touchdowns and
was enough to win them the game. Yeah.
Right. So very good. And then next week when we go live, we'll be hitting all of our props up, all of that good stuff as we rock and roll through that. Let's go ahead and heading over to the coaching carousel. And the wheel has kind of stopped spinning a little bit here this week. for a few teams anyway. News breaking today, right? The Carolina Panthers had already found their coach, was Frank Reich. The Broncos, the Texans finding their head coaches of the future there as well. The Texans hiring Demeco Ryans, and the Broncos going out and getting Sean Payton, still leaving the Cardinals and the Colts as to who is going to be their next head coaches. Guys, what are our thoughts on the carousel?
I really hope that Houston figures this out, because I'm really shocked that Demeco Ryans went to Houston, honestly. Like, I really didn't want to see him go there, because if he goes one and done, right, and Houston relieves him of duty after 1 year, I don't know how Houston avoids an NFL investigation, in all seriousness, of having three consecutive seasons of minority coaches, and they just go one and done between David Caldwell, Lovie Smith, and then Demeco Ryans. Like, I really hope that this works out, and I'm really shocked that Houston went that direction instead of a more experienced head coach. It just overall, just a more head coach that had head coaching experience, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And it's not against Ryans. Like, I think he would be a very good coach. I think he did a very good job in San Francisco, and I hope he's able to galvanize the Texans and be that leader of men, right, that people so often talk about. But holy smokes, man, if this thing goes south and Houston lets him go, they are going to have a lot of egg on their face really, really quickly, and we could possibly, not that we will, but we could possibly see another Commanders type investigation into Houston and the McNair family of their handling of minority head coaches.
Yeah, and it is an interesting one, because the AFC is so offensive minded right now. And so I can understand maybe you want to hire a defensive guy to slow down some of these offenses. I can understand that thought process behind it. But man, you would think that an offensive mind would be, the better. Just try to outscore somebody, right? Like you're gonna have to run and gun with some of these AFC teams, and the young AFC quarterbacks that don't look like they're going anywhere, that are going to command this division or this conference for the next decade plus. We're talking about, we're going to see, in the mix year in and year out, come the second weekend of the playoffs, we're likely going to see a Josh Allen, a Patrick Mahomes, a Joe Burrow. We're likely going to see these young quarterbacks that are doing it. Now that's predicated on the fact that, they don't sign buku crazy contracts, but we've seen it with Mahomes. You can sign a buku crazy contract and still get there. But it is an interesting one. I hope that Demeco Ryans, and Kevin, I think you're exactly right, that we could see an investigation if it goes the way that the last two have. We could see maybe even a forced sale of a team because of what is going on there. It's a pattern that will have developed at that point if we get to that. I do think it is interesting. Houston has so many flaws. You want to talk about a franchise that is just down and out. I went to a Texans game, and it was a game against their former quarterback that you would think that people would have been there for. And I'm not lying to you, when there was probably, the stadium was maybe half full, and maybe half of that was Cleveland fans there to watch Deshaun Watson. So they are hurting. They need something drastic to happen. I don't know that a defensive-minded coach really pushes the needle all that much for people. The draft is going to be very important for Houston. It's going to be very important for them that they get this draft right, and you hope that you get one of those quarterback head coach combinations that it seems like everybody's chasing after, a la Tom Brady and Bill Belichick. Maybe the McNairs think that Demeco Ryans, a defensive-minded head coach, will be the next Bill Belichick, and whoever they draft will be the next Tom Brady. And while that is, hope springs eternal, there are just a lot of things that Houston needs to get right, and probably pretty quickly, because I think there's a sense of apathy around the team, and that is the last thing that you want as an NFL team, is people to just not care.
Right.
Well, and one thing too with that is, when you look at it, they've got an incredibly young nucleus there, right? Like, part of the reason you go out and you get a young head coach, bring it in, is to kind of grow the team with you there. And when you look at where they spent a lot of draft capital last year in particular, it was heavy around the defensive side of things, right? The first true they took an offensive guard with their 15th overall pick, but that was their second draft selection there, in which they had done some other trading with things like that to move back there. But Derek Stingley, they took him 3rd overall, took Harris as a linebacker in the 3rd round there as well, took another defensive player, I believe, in the 2nd round. And then it wasn't until you got to Damian Pierce, I'm sorry, that you drafted a running back in the 4th round type of thing there. So, I think it makes a lot of sense that they've got this young nucleus of talent, and very young talent with a lot of potential there, to bring in a guy that's, kind of the rising star when it comes to defensive minds in the league right now. And that's probably one of the things that they're looking to potentially try and do, right? Like, the GM there came from the Patriots system and knows that you can build a championship caliber roster around the defensive side of things. And you can probably do that a little bit quicker than you can putting an offensive juggernaut out there. Cause we've seen that all before, and the old adage is defense wins championships. And so it makes a ton of sense. You also look at it from the standpoint, he lived in Houston, was drafted by the Texans, spent the first 6 years of his career there. His wife is from the area, her family's from the area, made a ton of sense there. Also, from the standpoint, I don't know that he's going anywhere with a 6-year contract. That's what it's been reportedly signed, that 6 years is what he's going to get. And so I think they'll find a coordinator that they'll bring in, their 2nd overall pick likely being spent on either Bryce Young or CJ Stroud would be my guess. And they're going to find probably more that combination of coordinator and quarterback to bring that along, more so than the head coach, and do that. So just kind of my 2 cents on that one. What other thoughts we got on the old carousel here?
How about
coming to Denver?
How about the 1st round draft pick that never was, and never was going to be, for the Denver Broncos, right? You want to talk about a man with a plan. George Payton, just knew, right, when he made that deal for Russell Wilson, right? And he knew, okay, we gave up a ton of draft picks. And then when he started to see, okay, this is not working with Nathaniel Hackett, we're going to have to do something. He knew we're going to have to get a 1st round pick back, because if we go get the guy that we think we should go get, it's going to cost us, and it's going to cost us at least 1 1st rounder. And we don't have those right now. So, I mean, talk about foresight. I think in my opinion, this is a long con finally come to fruition by the Broncos front office.
Yeah, I really hope so, right? And the deal works out really well. So essentially, they traded Bradley Chubb and a 2nd round pick next year for Sean Payton and a 3rd round pick next year, right? That's basically what it breaks down to. I'm okay with that. I'm okay with that. It was the 30th overall pick. It wasn't. Quite frankly, it's a pick that the Broncos probably would have traded out of to acquire some more draft capital anyway. But now you have a guy who averaged just over 27, I think it was just over 27.5 points. I think it's 27.6 points as a head coach in his 15 years in New Orleans. Now, Drew Brees had a lot to do with that, and I understand that. But that offensive philosophy still plays, and the Broncos do have talent in their skill position rooms. You have Greg Dulcich. You have Albert O, who showed fairly well late once he was given an opportunity again. You have Javonte Williams coming back on top of whoever else you're bringing into the
1,000 running backs that they used last year.
But that's okay. And then on top of that, you get Tim Patrick back, who tore his ACL in training camp. So he has over a full year of recovery and will be able to get back in there on top of Sutton and Judy. Like, the Broncos skill position players are there. It's going to take some work on the offensive line, right? Like, that is going to be a thing. So the Broncos are going to have to get creative and try and find some offensive line depth and talent. And whether that's free agency, whether it's in the third or what, because they have 2/3 this year, right? I believe
so.
I'm getting tongue-tied. 2 third-round picks this year, I believe. If they're spending one or both on offensive linemen to create some depth and competition there, like whatever that looks like. But once again, the Broncos find a way to reel the fan base back in, right? Everybody's writing their breakup letters, and they find a way to reel them back in. And we're at least going to tune in. We're going to see what this looks like for the first 5, 6, 7 weeks of the season before we give up on them again. But I guess good on them for trying, because this was about the only move that could have salvaged what was a disastrous first season for a Russell-led Denver Broncos team.
Yeah, I mean, that's disaster is the best way to put that. And it's probably the lightest way to put it, because that was just not what you expect out of the Denver Broncos.
Yeah, the Broncos, I just looked it up, are picking back-to-back with pick 68 and 69 in the third round. So, hopefully they get their guys right there.
I like those.
You can get decent.
True.
Yeah, you can get decent line help in the third round, right? Because you're flashy.
There's a lot of depth there.
Your flashy guys are going to go in your first and second, and then you get the guys that want to come to work. And guess what? You're going to get the guys that want to work because they weren't a first or a second round draft pick. And there's a lot to be said about where a guy gets drafted and the work ethic that they bring to camp with them.
Yeah, right. Absolutely. So I'm all for it. So good on them. Frank Reich, I'll be interested to see what he does at quarterback in Carolina, right? I think that'll be an interesting deal. I think Nathaniel Hackett at the Jets is comical. Good luck. That franchise just got set back. And I think Robert Saleh just put a death nail in his coffin with that hire right now. So,
yeah, I couldn't believe that, they let go of Mike LaFleur because, not getting the job done offensively when you saddled him with Zach Wilson. But at the flip side, you bring in Nathaniel Hackett, who we just saw have one of the worst head coaching seasons on record, especially for Broncos country. And the fact that, it seems to think that everybody's tied to this fact that if they bring in Nathaniel Hackett, Aaron Rodgers comes along with that. And I've seen a lot of rumors being floated that's, Aaron Rodgers and a trade between the Packers and all that could materialize between him and the Jets. But again, right, I don't know, right? Nathaniel is Nathaniel Hackett really the new Adam Gase? Is that really kind of what we're starting to see this become? Right? Tell me I'm wrong. Because
he's on the same track. He's on the tracks. That train is on that same track. You're not wrong there.
Or the Josh McDaniels track, right? You try head coaching, it bombs out. You have to go back to being a coordinator for another 6 years before you get your next crack. Either way, we'll see how it pans out and who they bring in for quarterback and whether it's Rodgers or Jimmy Garoppolo. I don't think Garoppolo fits what Hackett wants to do at all.
I don't think Hackett knows what he wants to do at all.
He certainly didn't display any of it in Denver. That's for sure.
Yeah. So
here's a thought. We should have the starters play at least part of a preseason game. That would be just to start. If Sean Payton rolls out Russell Wilson in preseason week 1, even if just for a series, we're already leaps and bounds ahead of where we were with Nathaniel Hackett.
Yeah, I'd settle for two series in week 2 and then a quarter in week 3. Right?
Just be a good idea to,
get a sweat going.
Or just, work with the people in kind of a live action type setting.
Yeah.
Outside of practice.
You mean glamping shouldn't be training camp?
Right.
Just it would be nice
So what are your guys' thoughts about Indianapolis and Arizona then? Where do they need to go? Because I have a couple opinions, imagine that, but I was just kind of curious to see if you guys had thoughts, dreams, or aspirations on what you think those two franchises should be looking at.
I don't know why the Cardinals seem like a done deal with Vance Joseph. Like, that's just kind of my sense on that, is that it seems like him and, in-house candidate, they seem to like each other there. He's got a resume enough to, kind of get there. But, looking at a lot of the rest of their candidates there, I don't know that, they necessarily want to go out and bring in like Evero for that deal. They get a first-time head coach with a quarterback that's coming back from a injury that you're not going to get him. So, it's one of those that you're going to have to play almost 2 to 3 years down the road with this head coaching job, because the guy that you bring in year one, your offense doesn't look very good. You got a lot of holes on the defensive side of things as well. So I think that's probably it, because I don't know that Mike Kafka gets it done. I don't know that Brian Callahan really is the guy that they're going to go out and try and bring in there. But it seems like Vance Joseph's the guy the Cardinals are going to settle on there. As far as the Colts go, again, this is one of those that they just kind of seem to be reaching at straws, and whoever they can get at this point is really how that kind of feels on that one, right? Like, you think about the number of players that have gone, or the number of coaches that have gone, no, I'm going back to my situation on that one. So I don't think it's going to be Jeff Saturday. I don't think the interim's coming back. I think they've saw enough of what Jeff Saturday is going to do there in Indy. But Indy seems like the job that, that somebody's going to finally settle up and go, it's a head coaching job. There's only 32 of them. I guess I'll take it.
Yeah,
Indy feels to me like they're waiting.
Go ahead.
Indy feels to me like they're waiting. Like, their coach is still involved. He's preparing to play a game in 2 weeks. Their next head coach. That's what it feels like to me. I think Indy tries to take a big swing here. Whether or not it works is to be seen. But I wouldn't be.
Are you guessing?
I'm guessing Bieniemy.
You're thinking
now
Bieniemy,
whether or not he
or are you
takes
thinking
that?
Steichen?
I'm guessing Bieniemy. I think, there's been a lot of talk over the last how many off seasons about Eric Bieniemy, and I understand that he's got a really good gig and he looks super good working, making Patrick Mahomes, like, he's the guy who can say, "You see Patrick Mahomes? That's me." Like, he can legitimately say that, and he's learning under Andy Reid. I think if the deal is right, I think Indy's going to pursue him. Whether or not he takes it, I think, is a different question, because we've seen this before where there was perfect spots for Eric Bieniemy and he didn't end up taking them.
Yes. I'd agree with the Bieniemy thing. I think that seems logical, unless they're done. I shouldn't say done with the first-time head coach thing, but Saturday was there. Raheem Morris is still intriguing to me. Like, again, you can do a lot with a defensive-minded head coach who can rally the defense as you hire an offensive staff to deal with a quarterback and developing an offense, right? Like, you have pieces. You have Jonathan Taylor, you have Michael Pittman, you have Alec Pierce. So you have some things that can work for you. But I understand the allure of Bieniemy, but I think Morris is the guy that I think they're going to go with. And then on the flip side with Arizona, I think they should go Brian Flores. I don't know that there's a coach that has gotten a more of a raw deal for really no reason than Brian Flores, and how he got blackballed because he wouldn't tank, and how that just magically got swept under the rug, right? Like, the NFL did not want that story going anywhere, and so it just magically disappeared into the ether. Brian Flores found a job with the Steelers, and everything's like, dude is head coach worthy, but I think he should probably get a shot there in Arizona. Traditionally, right, after you go offensive heavy, like Cliff Kingsbury was, You go defensive. Vance Joseph's there, but God, he was a terrible head coach. We saw that. Like, I mean, I'm not sold on that.
No, the Cardinals defense hasn't been anything to write home about either in the few seasons that he's been there.
Right. They've been horrible against the tight end back-to-back seasons and just gotten murdered and everything else. So I think Brian Flores and Raheem Morris kind of get their shot here. And a lot of that's because I'm hoping Evero comes back to Denver and coaches with Sean Payton and keeps this defense together for one more season, because I thought he did a really good job. And I think you probably only have him for one more season. Like, I do think he probably gets picked up this next cycle, if not this one. So I'm hoping he just comes back to what he knows. You know, sign a 3-year deal. You're sticking around for one until you can get a promotion, but we can worry about it next year.
Right.
Did you guys hear back to Sean Payton? Did you guys hear, you know, when this whole thing was, you know, Payton basically made it known that he was done doing TV and the year off was enough and he was ready to come back to coaching. There was initial reports out there that he had already started contacting other coaches that he wanted to work with him.
Mm-hmm.
And one of them was a defensive coordinator that he
Vic
really,
Fangio.
really liked. Vic Fangio.
Mm-hmm.
Would not be opposed to Vic Fangio being a defensive coordinator for the Denver Broncos. I don't think Vic Fangio would want to come back.
He has not signed. There's an interesting story on that one, right? Like, there was lots of reports that he is signed with the Dolphins as the defensive coordinator. That was a done deal, right? Like, heard all those same things, heard some additional stories earlier this day coming out that once Demeco Ryans got hired as the Houston head coach, Fangio was actually himself contacting teams to let them know that the deal isn't done and he's still available out there. I think Fangio really wants to go to the 49ers, and one coach there, but two, his girlfriend actually is out there and lives in San Francisco from everything else I've been seeing as well. So I think that's where Fangio really wants to end up, is in San Francisco. But you're right, Alex. I saw the same things that early on that, it was
Payton
one of those
put together his,
his all-stars.
Yes.
Yeah. And so
Fangio was the D coordinator, which is initially what made me think, oh, he's not coming to Denver.
Right. And that could be part of that too. And who knows if Fangio wants to come back, but that's, it's a completely different ownership group. And the guys that were making the decisions that fired him as the head coach are no longer with the organization. Right. Like
George.
Well, except for George Payton, you're right. But like, as we saw with that head coaching search, the ownership group's very involved with that. They did not. They seem to.
Wasn't Penner having dinner with Sean Payton?
Right.
Got a tweet out of Sean Payton about, hey, nope, my dinner with Denver was great. Great enough, I guess. Right.
Exactly. Right. Like, he was flying to Ann Arbor to meet Jim Harbaugh one more time before. So. Love seeing that there's an ownership group very involved in this one and wanting to make sure that they're finding their guys to go out there and get the job done.
Fly to Ann Arbor to see if Harbaugh had any interest being their OC.
He might have.
Is that what that meeting really was?
Oh, could have been.
Like, hey,
could have been.
It was all reported that it was head coach, but yeah.
Well, right, but I mean, hey, we have this deal with Payton. We appreciate you interviewing. We know that Sean Payton really appreciates you, and we're wondering if you had any interest coming back to the NFL as an offensive coordinator to see how that works for you. Like,
and maybe that's why Jim Harbaugh said, "No, I'm good. I'll stay at Michigan."
And I don't blame you, man. Once you're the captain of a ship, it's hard to be a crew member, right?
Especially at the collegiate level, when you are the captain
of a big time program, right?
That's your alma mater as well.
Yeah, we're not talking about Tulane or Tulsa or UTSA or something.
No, even Stanford.
We're talking a predominant, like, nationally recognized program who have.
Of historical significance as well.
Yeah,
where the logo gets you, national championship considerations right off the gate.
Right. Actually, some interesting things coming out as well from the coaching carousel. And this is one that I want to see, who ends up being right on this one. But there were competing tweets from both Schefter and Rappaport out there today. So kind of the two, head guys when it comes to reporting on NFL and reporting the major stories, where, Schefter, I believe, said that, the Broncos had been all in on Payton, hadn't pursued Demeco Ryans any further, hadn't spoken to him in a couple of days, and Rappaport saying that those conversations took place today, and those were the Broncos were actively pursuing Demeco Ryans up until basically he signed and then made the deal with Payton and the Saints.
And maybe they wanted Demeco Ryans to be the defensive coordinator. I mean, who knows? Who knows what?
Yeah,
maybe they were having conversations.
Could have been this ownership group trying to do things differently and just be above board, right? If they did have a conversation with Demeco Ryans today, what's there to say that? Look, man, we really appreciate it. We think that you have a great future. We like the things that you had to say, but at this time, we need to go in a different direction for our organization, and letting Ryans know that, hey, we're bowing out. So take what you can get,
right,
and call it good, right? Like, I mean, there's those types of conversations that go on too. I don't trust Rappaport as quickly as I trust Schefter personally. I feel like Schefter has a better hit rate of being accurate the first time, and Rappaport, there's been some instances where he's had to recant a story based off of a faulty source. So I'll take the Schefter route. Like, it was Payton all along, once they realized that they had a shot and could figure out compensation, and they were just trying to build this super team for Sean Payton, and it just wasn't going to quite work out, knowing that the other two guys they wanted were, having a head coach opportunity, and one was a collegiate god up in Ann Arbor.
Right. All righty. Any other thoughts on the coaching carousel?
No.
God, I hope it works with Sean Payton.
Well, I at least feel good about that. Like I said, out of all these moves, I think the one I'm most worried for is Demeco Ryans, because of where he's going, and time will tell. Derek, you had a good point with all the youth around him and how well he did with the defense in San Francisco. It's a great opportunity for him to galvanize a young, new defensive unit there in Houston. And now you're just trying to build an offensive staff and hope that him being relatively close to his playing days still. It seems like Demeco Ryans was playing, 3 years ago.
Right.
That he brings the right people in to develop a young quarterback, and you need some help, right? You need some offensive line. You need another receiver because Brandon Cooks wants out. You need obviously you need competition at quarterback because Davis Mills was not getting it done, and that platoon quarterback BS that they were running at the end of the season was a joke. So there's some work to do on the offensive side of the ball, but these moves make sense so far, right? Like, I don't see one necessarily scratching my head. I just worry for Ryans.
And I know we kind of glossed over it a little bit. We did touch on it, but I'm a big Frank Reich fan.
We're well aware.
And so I like Frank Reich. I think he did not get a fair shake in Indianapolis. And realistically, right, like, he wasn't supposed to be in Indianapolis, right? Remember, that was Josh McDaniels was hired as the Indianapolis head coach, and then all of a sudden said, "Oh, no, I'm going back to New England because Papa Bill said you're not leaving." So I think Frank Reich. I hope it works for him out there, because I'm big fan of Frank Reich.
Yeah, and Peg's Pick chiming in on there saying that the wide receiver core in Houston's pretty rough. Curious to see if they go with Nico and Mechie. It's a bit too young, assuming Mechie even comes back. I thought I saw reports out there that Mechie.
I think Mechie's he's on the like, he's ready to go, I think.
Yeah, so I think that we'll see him show up here this next year, right, and be ready to go. The fact that Houston has a bunch of picks in this draft class as well, should be interesting there. I think number two, they're easily spending that on a quarterback And then you're probably going offensive line, I think, with that other first rounder that they've got.
And they have tons of cap space, right?
A ton.
Yeah.
There's not great free agent wide receivers, but you can bring a veteran in, right? You can bring in a Jacoby Myers. You can bring in a Juju Smith-Schuster. You can bring in, that type of mid-tier wide receiver with veteran experience to try and bring a presence to that room. Honestly, I think it'd be a good fit for Juju, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
Like if Brandon Cooks is out, you have Nico, kind of the bigger bodied X receiver.
Right.
Mechie
is
could play the Y, but is really the Z, right? Like he's that kind of whatever. And Juju can play the same role, right? He's a great number 2, so he can play the Y or the Z as well and continue to do that. Same thing with Jacoby Myers. Like he could play outside. We saw him do that a ton in New England. He wasn't as efficient out of the slot, but that could have been just as much Mac Jones and the inability of the Patriots to have an offensive coordinator last year than anything else. So there's a couple veteran guys that they could bring in for a presence. Other than that, you got to stay young, and you're going to be going back to the well and trying to draft another receiver. So it's all part of the development process. But if they like Dameon Pierce, and there's no reason why they shouldn't, you're going to invest in quarterback and offensive line, and you're going to continue to bring young wide receivers in.
And he's saying you basically need someone as talented as Lawrence or better to make that receiver core work. You could be right there, but again, right? Like there's enough of veteran wide receivers out there that you could bring in that don't necessarily have to be the guy for you. And you've got enough draft capital that you can get somebody, very talented in the second round type of deal again, right? Like, and if you bring in, Bryce Young at with that second overall pick, well, he and Mechie already have a ton of chemistry built in there. It's one of those things that you don't necessarily have to worry about them getting on the same page. They already know what each other kind of likes to do, and it's just a matter of fitting those guys into the system of whoever the offensive coordinator is going to be down there in Texas. But right. You look at it, there's chances that you could go out and Paris Campbell is a guy that's he's a free agent. I don't think the Colts are bringing back. He could be a guy that you could do that. Noah Brown flashed a little bit. He could be a guy that you could bring in, kind of shore some of that up. You could bring in a consummate pro, Marvin Jones, who I don't think will be back with the Jaguars. DJ Chark's another guy that they could potentially go out and try and get. Juju, like you mentioned, Jacoby Myers. Like this is one of those that it's not necessarily a big flashy free agency pool, but there's a lot of guys that can go out and have that kind of veteran experience that you could bring in and really kind of galvanize that group together. I really do believe that. So very cool. Well, guys, let's go ahead and we're going to head into our debate for the evening here. And the debate is the Chicago Bears, who drafted Justin Fields, traded up to draft Justin Fields a while back there. And they've got the first overall pick. So in a quarterback heavy draft class, what do you think that the Bears should do here with that first overall pick? Are they trading Fields? Are they, trading the pick? Or they moving to the a defensive player with that first overall pick? If you are the Chicago Bears, what are you doing with this pick or with Fields? Let me know what you're talking here.
So Kevin, if you wouldn't mind leaning back on the camera there, just to show what shirt you're wearing. I think I know where Kevin's going to go. I have an inkling, and I tell you what, I'm on the same page as Kevin. I think that you have to at least play Justin Fields' rookie contract out, and I think that you see what happens when it happens when that goes. I think trading him away right now, I'm not sure that too many teams would be too interested in that, because at some point, provided he is not a one and done, he is up against his rookie deal. You're going to have to sign him and pay him a lot of money. And I don't know that that's too enticing for a lot of teams. Now, do I think that Chicago is listening to all offers? Yes. And I think they'd be silly not to. Well, I guess I shouldn't say do I think they are. they should be listening to all offers. But I think trading Justin Fields is not the answer right now. They've got so many other things going with that, with the stadium, with, all kinds of stuff surrounding that if you trade a quote unquote face of your franchise, like, I just don't think it works. So I think that they will go D-line. I think they take Jalen, what's his last name?
Carter.
Thank you. Jalen Carter out of Georgia. I think that the asking price might be too big to trade out of that spot. And when you can get a guy who's been on a winner, who is a disruptive, D lineman in a league where you need to have a disruptive D lineman, I think, in order to have a successful defense. And it's a spot that doesn't take a ton of coaching to get you to, a good level, right? At the D lineman spot, it's a lot of eat them up. It's a lot of get through, blocks and everything. And all that technique is taught in college. And he's coming from a pretty good college program. I would say a pretty good college program. So I think that they go ahead and draft Jalen Carter there with that number 1 pick. Now, in the hierarchy of things that I think will happen, I think it's draft Jalen Carter, trade away the pick, and then trade Justin Fields as the last thing. I just don't see them trading away Justin Fields.
Yes. Short. Man, where do I even want to go with this? What is the fastest way to disrupt a quarterback?
What's pass rush?
Right up the middle.
Uh-huh.
Right? Where does Jalen Carter play?
Defensive tackle.
Right in the middle. He is not quite as big. Well, he's not quite as big as Jordan Davis, right? Like that, but he's more athletic than Jordan Davis in a lot of different ways. He was one of the top, if not the top, interior defensive lineman against the run, so he can stop the run, and he demanded double teams at all times. So even if he wasn't physically disrupting the quarterback, he was allowing that second level or his other defensive linemen to get to the quarterback. All of these are good things. And all of this translates. We've seen how Jordan Davis does in Philadelphia, right? Like playing for a Super Bowl, and he's doing his job very, very well. Jalen Carter is going to be the same way. He is the best player in the draft, right? They don't need a quarterback. They're not going to get fair compensation for Fields, right? Like if you're a quarterback needy team, you want to be a quarterback needy team who knows what you're getting in return for a trade of 2 first-round picks and everything else, because the Broncos set the market last year with Russell Wilson. That's the market now. You could argue that Russell Wilson has more of a track record, but Justin Fields has all the unknown, and Wilson's age compared to Fields' talent and tenure ahead of him, in my mind, that balances out, right? So trade compensation, you're looking for the Broncos. You're not going to get it. The Jets aren't going to do it. Carolina's not going to do it. Seattle's not going to do it. So where else are you looking? You need to go defensive line, right? You shore up your offensive and defensive line. They need pass catchers. They know they need pass catchers, but they are going to continue to work through that, right? So Jalen Carter's kind of the clear answer. I don't understand where else they would go, and I would tell you anywhere else they go is probably a mistake, because I don't think that there's an offensive tackle in this class that is worthy of the 101.
No, I would agree with you on that one. There's some really good linemen on this one, but I think you're right. I don't know that you see somebody out there that is worth that 101. But where I'm going, if I'm the Bears, I'm trading away the pick. And realistically, what you're hoping for is that in the combine, through the draft process, some of these quarterback needy teams, such as Houston, such as Indianapolis, Carolina, even Atlanta, somebody in that top 10 type of pick. And realistically, I think you're hoping more for for Houston and Indianapolis to almost get into a bidding war with each other. and you make one of them leapfrog the other to make sure that they can get their guy, right? And so if you're Chicago, if you move back to number 4 with Indianapolis, there's a good chance you can still land Jalen Carter at that number 4 overall pick. If not, you can probably move to, it's going to be tough, but there's still right. Houston's going quarterback. We've determined that. Indy's going quarterback. So all you got to worry about is Arizona and what they're doing there, right? Arizona's got a ton of other needs all across the board. They could go defensive tackle, but I think they'd probably go with Will Anderson at that point. They need a little bit more of a linebacker and a rush, an edge rusher than a defensive tackle there. So I think that's probably where they would land if they've got both of those players on the board. And so there's a good chance Chicago could trade back to number 4, still get their guy they want, and go out, get at least 2 or 3 more draft picks as compensation, because you're probably going to pick up Indy's second round this year, and maybe a second and a third next year to move from 1 to 4. Is about how that compensation would work out on as far as how I'm thinking.
But if you're Indy, aren't you saying the same thing of why we would? I mean, if you like Stroud and Bryce Young the same, right? If they're 1A and 1B,
right?
If you're Indianapolis, you're going, why do I care? Arizona's not taking a quarterback. They just signed Kyler Murray to big-time money. Yes, Houston will take one. We'll gladly take whichever one they decide to pass on.
Right.
I think it's going to be hard. I just don't see a team outside of Houston or Indianapolis having enough capital to make it worthwhile for the Bears and sacrificing their future. I guess you could argue Seattle. You could make an argument for Seattle, I suppose. Right. But neither one of these quarterbacks fit the Pete Carroll mode.
No.
Right? Bryce Young is the closest thing to Russell Wilson. Kind of. But
right.
I don't know if Pete Carroll is going to want to go down that road again. Like, he's just acquiring talent between last year and this year's draft. They've done a really good job. Mm-hmm. We're just going to hit on these picks, and we are going to be so sound that our quarterback will be able to find ways to get the ball to DK and Tyler Lockett, and we're just going to figure it out, whoever that is.
Right. What I'm saying though is you're gonna have to hope, if you're Chicago, that one of these quarterbacks stands themselves out as the clear 101 type of deal, right? Not more like the Trevor Lawrence versus the rest of that loaded quarterback class that we all thought from a couple of years ago, right? Like Trevor Lawrence was a clear heads and tails difference maker out there on that one. And so Chicago's got to hope that somebody comes through with that type of performance, both through the combine, through the draft interview process, through all the things that they go through on these things. And clearly becomes their guy, or like Trey Lance did in that same draft class where he stood out and clearly became their guy for San Francisco to go out and trade up and go get, right? Like that's what they've got to hope for, is that one of these guys differentiates themselves to that extent. So somebody's willing to come up and get him, get their guy, instead of waiting and just letting the board fall, and they're good with either one of these two that falls to them. Like that's what they've got to hope for. And I think you'll probably see that, where one of these teams will get hot and heavy over one of these quarterbacks and go get them.
And I think that is a possibility, Derek. And I think that's probably the most likely way that Chicago gets out of that. But what you have to understand is that Trey Lance was the third pick, right? Mm-hmm. He was number 3 overall. That's right. And I understand that the third pick, is only 2 picks away, but you're talking about the very first pick in the draft. Like, that still brings more capital to it than even the third pick. And the third pick, San Francisco gave up a lot to get that third pick. But
we have precedents over this before, right? Yeah. Eli Manning and Phillip Rivers, right? Like the trade compensation package wouldn't be that dissimilar from what we saw back then. And something like that would be that Chicago moves to 4, gets Indy's early second, and then most likely gets a second and a third the following year, right? Like that's even better draft compensation than what the Giants gave up for the Phillip Rivers and Eli Manning trade.
Yeah, I still just think that Fields is I think that Chicago is married to Fields, and they just, look, NFL teams are no longer married to their top 10 first round draft pick or their top 15 first round draft pick. That's a quarterback. NFL, I think we've seen that now. And I think that a lot of NFL teams would be thrilled to do something like what Philly has done twice now. And that is get a quarterback who's hot on his rookie deal, ride him to a Super Bowl, and then pray to God you get the next one a couple of years later, because they're cheap and you can build a team around it when it comes to. Oh, did I freeze?
No, it's Kevin. That's the freezy.
Oh, okay.
Oh, it's me.
Yeah.
It's that hotel Wi-Fi.
Blame the hill.
Damn Wi-Fi.
But I think that a lot of the NFL teams would be much happier doing that, not signing that, buku contract to their quarterback the second year. So honestly, I think Chicago would be more than okay just letting Fields walk. Give him the Sam Darnold treatment, or give him the Josh Rosen treatment, or find a guy that you like better than what you got. Draft him instead, because the rookie contracts aren't as exorbitant as they used to be. You can blame Jamarcus Russell for that one, and you don't have to pay. You get a cheap quarterback that's good. So I think that they sit, they wait, they ride out whatever they can get out of Justin Fields, and then maybe I think we have this discussion next year after, when he's on the last year of his rookie deal, and I think that's where Chicago really has to be, considering what are we going to do. I just think it's a year too early. Well, I don't think they were planning on being this bad that they would have the number 1 overall pick. Right. But, look, it shook out that way because the Texans wouldn't quit winning, apparently.
Right. Peng's pick saying trade Fields not because you don't believe he isn't talented, but rather you aren't getting full value on his rookie contract and are already worn down from running the ball. The Bears probably have one of the worst 53-man rosters in the league, too much to rebuild. But man, oh man, do they got some salary cap.
They got a ton of cap space, to the point that they're borderline. I mean, if they don't spend enough in free agency, they're going to get penalized for not spending cap. So
right.
There's going to be some stupid contracts being handed out in Chicago. And quite frankly, that might be where some of the receiver depth comes from, right? Like they might try and grab Juju and Jacoby Myers to pair up with Darnell Mooney, grab an offensive lineman. Oh, then that's right. I forgot Claypool was there, right? You grab an offensive lineman to help Fields out. You can do a whole bunch of things with Chicago. This free agency class will be interesting, and the Bears have a lot of holes to fill, especially on the defensive side of the ball.
Yes, tons and tons. Although there's some pretty good, especially like linebackers, things like that are hitting the market here that could be very, very interesting with that. Like Deion Jones is a guy that they could bring in, pay, that shores up kind of that inside linebacker spot. Levante David, you could bring him in, shore that up there a little bit there as well, even though he's a little bit older. Like there's some moves that they could make on that defensive side from a free agency standpoint. Go a little crazy there. You could shore up some things, and then really, I think if they can move that pick and get some good compensation, you could build this thing and have a quick turnaround. Any other thoughts on this one?
No.
All righty. Well, that's going to do it for us tonight. Any final thoughts out there for the viewers and listeners?
It is Senior Bowl week. So
yes,
if you are starved for NFL content, in fact, there was the NFLPA Bowl was on, I think, last Saturday. If you are starved for football in this bye week of sorts, the Senior Bowl is this week. And really, as I've mentioned before, there's gonna be a lot of dudes that get picked that are participating in that game. I mean, they don't just offer anybody that invite to that. So those scouts, they work hard to try and get the top talent in that game. Obviously, they have to be a senior, so you're not going to see some of these underclassmen that are coming out. These are guys that had to have aged out of college football. But there will be some dudes playing in that, and they do have a good track record. So it's a good way to start making your wish list for what you hope your team does Fortunately, the Broncos do not have a first or a second round pick, so I'm not really going to pay attention to it this year because figure out what we're doing in the third round. I don't have to pay attention on Thursday. I can tune in late on Friday, a draft weekend this year, so it'll be great.
There you go. Kevin, any final thoughts out there?
No, not at the moment. Enjoy the week off, right? It's been a grind. We've gotten this far. Enjoy the week off. Check out the flag football game of the Pro Bowl this weekend. Obviously, the Senior Bowl, for all of you football nerds like us that, like to get ready for dynasty drafts and kind of figure out where some of this stuff is shaking out and see where things are. It's a little bit harder now that there's 16 different NFL teams involved with these coaching staffs, like to pick placements. But I think that there's a lot of, like Alex said, a lot of talent there. So, pay attention to some of the reports coming out and kind of seeing who's going to start trending up boards early, right? The name that kind of gets floated around. But other than that, we'll be back next week. We'll do Super Bowl props, right? We'll we'll break down the game a little bit, get into that a little bit more. I'm sure there'll be more news and notes around the coaching carousel. And, God knows what else the NFL is going to hand us because they always got something around the corner that we're not quite expecting. So enjoy it. The grind is slowing down for 2022, and then it's going to turn right around and ramp up for 2023.
Right. Well, that's going to do it for us. Make sure you hit us up on all those socials, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, at Good Old Boys FF. The best place to support this independent podcast. Head over to the YouTube channel, click that subscribe button, ring the bell, hit the like button, leave us comments, all that good stuff. And we'll see you all again next week. He's Kevin. He's Alex. I'm Derek. Have a good one. Be safe.